The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional whispers of curiosity rippling through the audience. Judge Warren Lattimore, a man whose name had become synonymous with controversy, leaned back in his towering leather chair. His cold blue eyes swept over the two defendants standing before him, twin black sisters, Naomi and Nia Carter. Their wrists were cuffed, their sharp gazes unwavering. They were dressed in plain civilian clothing, their braided hair neatly tied back. Their posture was rigid, almost military-like, but Judge Lattimore saw none of that. Well, he drawled, adjusting his robe with an air of superiority. Look at what we have here. Two troublemakers who think the law doesn't apply to them. You people never learn, do you? A murmur of discontent rose in the room, but the judge ignored it. He tapped his gavel lightly against the bench, smirking. Let me guess, resisting arrest? Assaulting an officer? Or did you simply forget that stealing is illegal? Nia inhaled deeply, her jaw tightening. Naomi, the calmer of the two, placed a steadying hand on her sister's arm. Their attorney had already warned them that Lattimore had a reputation for being ruthless toward people who looked like them. But they hadn't expected outright mockery. We didn't steal anything, Naomi said, her voice measured. We intervened when we saw a man assaulting a young woman in the street. We took him down before he could hurt her any further. Oh, so now you're vigilantes? Lattimore scoffed. That's rich. Two little girls playing hero. You should have left that job to the police. Oh, wait. You probably have issues with law enforcement, don't you? His grin widened as chuckles spread through a group of white spectators sitting in the back. Nia clenched her fists. The cops were 5 minutes away. That girl would have been dead by the time they arrived, she snapped. Such language, Lattimore mused, shaking his head in mock disappointment. I expected more manners from young women, but I suppose that's asking too much. The twins remained silent. They knew exactly what he was doing. Poking, prodding, trying to get a reaction he could use against them. But they weren't just any ordinary black women standing before him. Naomi stepped forward slightly, her expression unreadable. Your Honor, before you pass judgment, I think it's only fair you know exactly who we are. Lattimore waved his hand dismissively. I don't need to know. I see exactly who you are. A slow, knowing smile spread across Naomi's lips. No, you don't. Nia reached into her pocket, her fingers curling around something small. Before anyone could react, she pulled out a military challenge coin and tossed it onto the judge's bench. The metal clinked against the wood, silencing the room. Lattimore frowned, picking up the coin. His smug expression faltered as he turned it over, his lips parting slightly. The emblem was unmistakable, the mark of the United States Army Special Forces. The room held its breath. We're not criminals, Naomi said coolly. We're U.S. Army veterans, Special Forces operatives, trained in combat, survival, and reconnaissance. We've served overseas, protected this country, and put our lives on the line. Nia folded her arms. And right now, you're ridiculing two women who were trained to take down enemies far more dangerous than a washed-up, racist judge hiding behind his bench. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Even the chuckling men in the back were no longer laughing. Lattimore's hands trembled slightly as he set the coin down. He glanced at the sisters, his face paling. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. They were supposed to cower, to shrink under his words. Instead, they stood taller, stronger. And now the entire courtroom was watching him, waiting to see how he would respond. Judge Lattimore's lips pressed into a thin line as he tried to regain control of the situation. His fingers twitched against the military challenge coin resting on his desk, but he quickly shoved it aside, as if touching it burned his skin. The courtroom remained silent, the weight of the twins' revelation hanging thick in the air. Even the officers standing by the door shifted uncomfortably, exchanging wary glances. The name U.S. Army Special Forces carried weight, serious weight. It wasn't just another military title. It signified elite training, a level of skill and discipline most people couldn't even comprehend. You expect me to believe this? Lattimore finally said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Two girls like you, Special Forces? Sounds like a made-up sob story to get out of trouble. Naomi chuckled, shaking her head. You know, your kind never changes. Always assuming the worst when it comes to people like us. But we don't need you to believe it, Judge. The truth doesn't require your approval. The tension in the room escalated. Nia took a step forward, her sharp gaze locking on Lattimore. Check the Pentagon database if you want proof. Our records are there. Medals, missions, commendations. We earned our place. Fought in wars while you sat comfortably behind this desk, playing God over people's lives. A flicker of hesitation crossed Lattimore's face. His authority had never been questioned like this, especially not in his own courtroom. His reputation was built on intimidation, on ensuring that people left this room feeling powerless. But right now, it was him who felt exposed. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Even the jury, who were supposed to remain neutral, couldn't hide their intrigue. A few journalists in the audience scribbled frantically, their interest piqued. This was more than just a routine case now. It was a story. Your Honor, may I approach? The twins' lawyer, Marcus Evans, finally spoke up, stepping forward with a folder in his hands. He had been waiting for this moment, letting his clients handle things in their own way. Lattimore hesitated, but with all eyes on him, he had no choice but to nod. Proceed. Evans walked up to the bench, placing the folder down. Inside are their service records, including honorable discharge papers and official documentation verifying their time in the Army. If you still have doubts, I suggest we call the Department of Defense and let them clarify it for you. Lattimore clenched his jaw. He knew the moment he opened that folder, he would be confirming that these women weren't just some random street punks looking for trouble. But what choice did he have? If he refused to even look at the evidence, he would expose himself as the racist fraud they already believed him to be. Slowly, he reached for the folder, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the papers, his expression shifting as he read through their records. Special Operations Forces, multiple combat tours, high-level security clearances. The list went on. He swallowed hard. You see, Nia said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. If we wanted to take down that man in the street, we could have done it in ways that you wouldn't even understand. But we didn't. We restrained him, protected the victim, and waited for the authorities. Because that's what real soldiers do. We follow protocol, even when the system is stacked against us. Naomi took a step closer to the bench. So tell us, Your Honor, what exactly is our crime here? Because if it's doing the right thing, then you better start arresting every good soldier who ever put their life on the line for justice. Lattimore's face was red now, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. He had lost control of the narrative, and he knew it. The courtroom remained silent, waiting for his response. But for the first time in his long career, Judge Warren Lattimore had nothing to say. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Judge Lattimore shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence visibly shaken. The courtroom, once under his control, now belonged to Naomi and Nia Carter. The gallery watched, enthralled, as the once untouchable judge squirmed in the face of undeniable truth. He cleared his throat, grasping at the last shreds of authority he had left. Regardless of your background, he said, his voice strained, the fact remains that you interfered with an arrest. You engaged in a physical altercation with a civilian. That is still a violation of the law. Naomi smirked, shaking her head. That's rich, coming from someone who's let actual criminals walk free. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Lattimore shot a glare at them. His usual intimidation tactics weren't working, and he knew it. His reputation had been built on keeping people like Naomi and Nia beneath him, ensuring they never felt like they had power. But today, that power was slipping from his grasp. The police report itself states that we neutralized a violent threat, Nia said, her voice firm. We didn't use excessive force. We detained the suspect until law enforcement arrived. If that's illegal, then maybe you should start charging every off-duty cop who does the same thing. Marcus Evans, their lawyer, stepped forward again, his confidence unwavering. Your Honor, let's cut the theatrics. The prosecution has no case. No charges should have been filed in the first place. The only reason we're standing here is because my clients happen to be black women who took action instead of waiting for help that wasn't coming fast enough. Lattimore's fingers tapped aggressively against his desk. He was being cornered, and he hated it. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the courtroom doors burst open. A tall man in a military uniform strode inside, his presence commanding immediate attention. The room seemed to shrink under his authority. His silver insignia gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his gaze was sharp and focused. "Colonel Daniel Mercer, United States Army," the man announced, holding up his credentials. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet power that immediately silenced any remaining whispers. "I was just informed that 2 of my soldiers are standing trial under questionable circumstances." Lattimore's face drained of color. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected the military to take an interest in a simple case involving 2 black women. The colonel walked straight toward the bench, his gaze unflinching. "Your Honor, I came here to make sure that justice is properly served. But after what I just heard, it's clear that justice isn't exactly your priority." A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. Nobody ever spoke to Judge Lattimore like that, not in his own courtroom. The judge's hand shook as he reached for his gavel. But before he could slam it down, Colonel Mercer continued. "These women," he said, motioning toward Naomi and Nia, "served with distinction. They saved lives, both on and off the battlefield. And now, instead of honoring their service, you're choosing to humiliate them? Punish them for doing the right thing? Is that what your courtroom stands for?" Lattimore's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He could feel the weight of every stare in the room burning into him. His authority, once absolute, had been dismantled in mere minutes. The colonel turned to the prosecutor's table. "Drop the charges. Now." The prosecutor, clearly shaken, hesitated for only a moment before nodding rapidly. The prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against the defendants, Your Honor." A slow smile spread across Naomi's face. Nia exhaled sharply, her body finally relaxing. Lattimore clenched his jaw, his pride at war with reality. He had already lost. He slammed his gavel down. "Case dismissed," he muttered, his voice barely audible. But Naomi and Nia heard it. They had won, and as they turned to leave the courtroom, their heads held high, they knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be the last time someone like Lattimore tried to put them in their place. But the next time, they'd be ready. As Naomi and Nia stepped out of the courtroom, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind them, a wave of relief washed over them. The tension in their muscles eased, but the fire in their chests still burned. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about every black person who had ever stood in front of a judge like Lattimore, knowing the system was already rigged against them. Their lawyer, Marcus Evans, let out a low whistle. Damn, that was one hell of a way to win a case. He adjusted his tie, still looking a little shaken from how quickly the tides had turned. I was expecting a fight, but I wasn't expecting Colonel Mercer to walk in like a damn action movie hero. Naomi chuckled, shaking her head. Neither were we. We didn't call him. Marcus frowned. Then how did he know? Before they could answer, a familiar voice cut through the air. I did. All three turned to see a woman in a crisp gray suit standing by the courthouse steps. Her salt and pepper hair was neatly pulled into a bun, and her expression was unreadable. But Naomi and Nia recognized her immediately. General Olivia Carter, Nia said, her voice carrying a mixture of respect and surprise. Their former commanding officer gave them a small nod, her sharp gaze sweeping over them. I heard about what happened. I wasn't going to let a judge with a superiority complex ruin the careers of two of my best soldiers. Naomi raised an eyebrow. We're not soldiers anymore, ma'am. Olivia smirked. Once a soldier, always a soldier. For a brief moment, the weight of what had just happened seemed to lift. But before they could dwell on it, Olivia's expression hardened. You two need to be careful, she said, lowering her voice. You embarrassed a powerful man today. Men like Lattimore don't take humiliation well. Marcus scoffed. What's he going to do? Retaliate? He's a damn judge. He should be worrying about saving what's left of his reputation. But Naomi and Nia knew better. They had spent years studying threats, predicting their enemies' next moves. Lattimore was a coward, but cowards were often the most dangerous when cornered. Olivia sighed. Listen, I pulled some strings to make sure this went away, but Lattimore isn't the only problem. He's part of a system that doesn't like being challenged. He may have lost today, but he's not alone. Nia crossed her arms. We're not afraid of him. You should be, Olivia said, because I've seen what men like him do when they feel powerless. A chill settled over the group. The fight wasn't over. Not really. This wasn't just about a courtroom or a racist judge. This was about something bigger. Naomi glanced around the street, her instincts kicking in. They were being watched. She could feel it. A black SUV sat parked across the road, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. She nudged Nia subtly. We need to move. Nia caught on immediately. Yeah, let's get out of here. Olivia followed their line of sight and let out a slow breath. You see it too. Marcus, oblivious, frowned. See what? Olivia placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You should go home, Marcus. This isn't your fight anymore. The lawyer hesitated, clearly unsettled by her serious tone. But one look at the twin sisters told him everything he needed to know. These weren't just two women who had won a case. They were warriors stepping onto a battlefield they hadn't expected. And the war had only just begun. Naomi and Nia walked away from the courthouse with steady steps, but their senses were on high alert. The black SUV hadn't moved, but they knew better than to assume they were in the clear. They had been trained for moments like this, to notice the small details, to feel the shift in energy when something wasn't right. And right now, something was definitely wrong. Olivia walked beside them, her movements as fluid and controlled as ever. You have a plan? She asked, keeping her voice low. Naomi nodded. We do. Nia glanced back at the SUV once before pulling out her phone and typing quickly. A few seconds later, a rideshare car rolled up to the curb. They climbed inside without hesitation. Olivia followed without question. As the car pulled away, Naomi finally exhaled. We need to figure out who's watching us. I could take a guess, Olivia said. Lattimore. Nia scoffed. He doesn't have the guts to come after us himself. No, Olivia agreed. But men like him never work alone. You embarrassed him. Worse, you exposed him. Judges like Lattimore rely on people not fighting back. He knows you won't stay quiet. Naomi's jaw tightened. Then he's right about that. The driver didn't speak as he weaved through traffic. Naomi had requested a randomized route, making sure they weren't being followed. It was a habit they had developed overseas, and right now, it was proving useful. Finally, they reached their destination, a small private gym in an industrial part of town. No cameras, no prying eyes. Just a place where they could talk without fear of being overheard. Inside, the twins locked the doors and turned to Olivia. Tell us what you know, Nia said. Olivia folded her arms. Lattimore is connected. Judges like him don't get to where they are without making powerful friends. But he's more than just another racist on the bench. He's part of a network. A group of people who want to keep the system exactly as it is. And if they see you as a threat, they won't hesitate to remove you. Naomi frowned. So what are we looking at? Police? Politicians? Both, Olivia said. And more. You didn't just beat Lattimore today. You sent a message. And now, they're going to want to send one back. Nia smirked. Let them try. Olivia's eyes darkened. They won't try. They will. And if you're not ready, you won't survive it. Silence settled between them. Naomi and Nia exchanged a glance. They had faced threats before, terrorists, warlords, train killers. But this was different. This was a war fought in the shadows, where enemies hid behind power and influence instead of guns and knives. But a threat was still a threat, and they knew how to deal with threats. Naomi cracked her knuckles. Then I guess it's time we remind them exactly who we are. The dimly lit gym smelled of sweat and steel, a familiar combination that grounded Naomi and Nia. This was their element, preparing for battle. Only this time, the enemy wasn't some warlord in a foreign land. It was a network of powerful men in suits who controlled the system from behind desks and gavels. Olivia leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I pulled some strings, but that won't keep you safe forever. Lattimore's allies won't just let this go. They'll come at you in ways you can't predict. Discredit you. Frame you. Hell, They might even try to make you disappear. Nia let out a sharp laugh. Let them try. We don't disappear. We make people disappear. Olivia's eyes darkened. This isn't war, Carter. You can't just take these men out and call it a mission success. Naomi, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. Then we don't fight them in the dark. We fight them in the light. We expose them. Olivia studied her, considering. You think you can take down an entire network of corrupt judges, politicians, and cops just by exposing them? Naomi's lips curled into a smirk. We won today because we had the truth on our side. But truth means nothing if no one hears it. She turned to Nia. We need to go on the offensive. Nia nodded. We start digging. Find out who backs Lattimore, who protects him, who benefits from his rulings. Then we make sure the world knows exactly who they are. Olivia exhaled, rubbing her temples. You two are insane. Naomi grinned. We're special forces. Insane is part of the job. Olivia shook her head, but didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I was hoping you'd say that. This is everything I could find on Lattimore so far. Connections, backdoor deals, cases he's manipulated. It's not enough to take him down completely, but it's a start. Naomi took the drive, flipping it between her fingers. This is good, but we'll need more. Nia cracked her knuckles. Then we dig deeper. If Lattimore wants to play dirty, we'll bury him. Olivia sighed. Just be careful. These men don't play fair. Naomi's smirk faded, her eyes turning cold. Neither do we. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the weight of what they were about to do settling in. Then Nia pulled out her phone. Time to make some calls? Naomi nodded. Time to start a war. The war had begun. Naomi and Nia worked quickly, their military instincts kicking in as they dug into Lattimore's past. Every corrupt man had skeletons, and they were going to drag his into the light. Naomi sat at a small wooden desk in their safe house, a rented apartment under a fake name, staring at a laptop screen filled with files Olivia had given them. Nia paced behind her, phone in hand, calling in favors from old army contacts who had access to information most people couldn't even dream of getting. We've got bank statements, off-the-record meetings, and sealed court documents, Naomi muttered, scrolling through encrypted files. Lattimore isn't just some racist judge on a power trip. He's been fixing cases for years. Nia stopped pacing. Who's pulling the strings? Naomi's fingers flew across the keyboard, hacking into a network of shell corporations that Olivia had flagged as suspicious. A few keystrokes later, the screen populated with names. She exhaled. It's worse than we thought. On the screen were connections leading to the Sentinel Group, a powerful private security firm that operated in the shadows. Officially, they provided security services for politicians, judges, and high-ranking officials. Unofficially, they eliminated problems, people who got in the way. Nia clenched her fists. These are mercenaries, assassins disguised as security contractors. Naomi nodded. And Lattimore is on their payroll. Nia stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. This isn't just about ruining us in court. If the Sentinel Group is involved, they'll come after us directly. A heavy silence settled in the room. Then Naomi's laptop pinged with an alert. Her breath caught as she read the notification. Nia moved instantly, unplugging the router, killing the power to the apartment. We need to go. Now. A second later, their burner phone rang. Naomi answered. Who is this? A low voice responded. You should have walked away. Then the line went dead. Naomi's stomach tightened. They know where we are? Nia grabbed their go-bags. Then let's not be here when they show up. Without another word, they moved. Years of military training kicked in, their movements efficient and precise. Within 2 minutes, they were out the back door, slipping into the alleyway just as an unmarked black SUV rolled to a stop in front of the apartment. Men in tactical gear stepped out, scanning the area. Nia looked at Naomi. They're not here to scare us. Naomi's expression hardened. No, they're here to kill us. For a moment, the two sisters locked eyes. Then, as one, they disappeared into the night. The cold night air hit their skin as Naomi and Nia moved swiftly through the darkened alleyways, their steps silent, their senses sharp. Years of training had prepared them for situations like this. Being hunted, being outnumbered, being forced to think 2 steps ahead of their enemy. Behind them, the black SUV sat idling. The men inside weren't rushing. They knew what they were doing. They were professionals. The Sentinel group didn't send warnings. They sent executions, asterisk, asterisk. We need to break their line of sight, Nia murmured, keeping her pace steady but controlled. If they spot us running, they'll move in faster. Naomi nodded, keeping her eyes on their surroundings. We head west, slip through the underground parking garage, and come out near the train station. If they're tracking our devices, we ditch them there. Nia didn't hesitate. Without breaking stride, she pulled out her phone, crushed it under her boot, and kicked the shattered remains into a storm drain. Naomi did the same, then glanced up just in time to see a man step out of the SUV, his silhouette cast against the streetlights. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a precision that sent a chill down Naomi's spine. This wasn't just some hired thug. This was a hunter. "We've got a leader," Naomi muttered. Nia barely flicked a glance over her shoulder. "Good. That means if we take him out, the others will hesitate." They turned a corner, blending into the late-night crowd near a row of bars and restaurants. Loud music thumped from a nearby club, neon lights casting a shifting glow over the sidewalks. People laughed and stumbled past them, unaware that 2 trained killers were maneuvering through their midst. Nia spotted the underground parking garage entrance up ahead. There, they slipped inside, the artificial lights flickering dimly overhead. The scent of gasoline and concrete filled the air as they weaved between parked cars, their footsteps muffled by the enclosed space. Then Naomi heard it, a faint echo of boots against pavement. Controlled, measured. They had followed. Nia caught it too. She motioned toward a parked van, and they ducked behind it just as 3 men entered the garage, their weapons barely concealed beneath their jackets. 3 operatives, Naomi whispered. Armed. Tactical movement. They're searching, not rushing. They think we're untrained, Nia smirked. They have no idea who they're hunting. Naomi's mind worked fast. They could escape, disappear into the city, but that wouldn't solve the problem. If they didn't handle this now, Sentinel would keep coming. She looked at her sister. Nia already knew what she was thinking. "We take them out," Nia said, her voice a low whisper. Naomi nodded. Fast and quiet. The sisters moved in perfect synchronization. Years of Special Forces training had turned them into shadows, silent, deadly, invisible. The first man barely had time to react before Nia's arm wrapped around his neck, her grip cutting off his air supply. He struggled, reaching for his gun, but she twisted sharply. His body went limp. She eased him to the ground without a sound. Naomi moved just as fast, her elbow slamming into the second man's throat. He staggered, choking, before she swept his legs out from under him and delivered a precise strike to his temple. He didn't get back up. The third man had just enough time to pull his weapon before Nia was on him. She grabbed his wrist, twisting it at an unnatural angle, forcing the gun from his grip. His mouth opened to yell, but Naomi's fist silenced him, knocking him unconscious before he could alert the others. They dragged the bodies behind a row of parked cars, stripping them of their weapons and earpieces. Then Naomi grabbed one of the men's radios and pressed the call button. "Targets neutralized," she said, keeping her voice calm and even, mimicking a professional report. A brief pause, then a static-filled reply. "Copy that. Stand by for exfil." Nia smirked. "They think their men are still alive?" Naomi tossed the radio into the nearest drain. "Good. That buys us time." They took the men's weapons and exited the garage through the opposite side, slipping into the shadows once more. The game had changed. Sentinel thought they were the hunters. But now Naomi and Nia were hunting them, asterisk, asterisk. The city stretched before them, alive with flashing lights and the hum of restless energy. Naomi and Nia moved through the shadows, their stolen weapons secured beneath their jackets. The Sentinel group had come to eliminate them, but now the sisters were flipping the script. "We need to find out where these guys are operating from," Naomi said, keeping her voice low as they wove through the crowded streets. They don't just send hit squads without a command center nearby. Nia tapped the side of her head, thinking. The judge isn't their boss. He's a pawn. Someone bigger is pulling the strings. If we shake the right tree, the real players will show themselves. Naomi's phone vibrated inside her jacket. Not her real phone, the encrypted one, the one only a handful of people had access to. She pulled it out and checked the screen. Blocked number. She answered. Speak. A familiar voice came through the line, sharp and controlled. You two just made a lot of enemies. Tell us something we don't know, Olivia, Naomi said dryly. Olivia sighed on the other end. Sentinel's pissed. I intercepted a transmission. Your names are flagged. You don't just have a hit squad on you anymore. They're escalating. Nia glanced at Naomi, her jaw tightening. Meaning? Meaning you're not dealing with hired guns anymore. They're bringing in specialists. People who don't miss. Naomi clenched her fist. Then we strike first. A pause. Then Olivia's voice dropped to something darker. I was hoping you'd say that. I have a lead. Where? Abandoned factory in Red Hook. It's a front. Sentinel operatives have been using it as a staging ground. If you want to hit them where it hurts, that's your target. Nia grinned. Now we're talking. Olivia hesitated. Listen, I don't need to tell you what's at stake. These aren't rookies. You screw this up, you're not walking away. Naomi's grip tightened around the phone. Then we don't screw it up? She hung up. Nia cracked her neck. So what's the plan? Naomi's eyes burned with focus. We go in, we take them apart, and we send a message. Nia finished her sentence, a wicked smirk on her lips. Come after us again, and you. They arrived at the factory an hour later. The building was an old shipping warehouse, rusted and forgotten, sitting near the docks like a corpse of the past. But inside, Naomi and Nia knew it wasn't abandoned. Sentinel was here. The sisters took position on a rooftop across the street, observing through a pair of binoculars. 2 guards at the entrance, Naomi noted. Another on the roof. No patrols. Nia smirked. They think no one's stupid enough to attack them here. Naomi lowered the binoculars. Then let's be stupid. They moved like ghosts, descending from the rooftop and crossing the open ground without a sound. The first guard barely had time to exhale before Naomi's knife slipped beneath his chin, silencing him forever. Nia handled the second guard with brutal efficiency, twisting his head at an unnatural angle before lowering his body to the ground. The man on the roof was next. Naomi climbed the side of the building, her grip sure and steady. As she reached the top, she saw him leaning over, scanning the area below. He never saw her coming. A quick, precise movement, and his body slumped against the rooftop, lifeless. Nia joined her seconds later. That's 3 down. Time to see what's inside. They slipped into the building through a side window, landing in the shadows. The interior was dimly lit, rows of crates and old machinery creating a maze of cover. Voices echoed through the space. We're supposed to wait for the call, one man muttered. Another scoffed. Call or not, those 2 are dead by morning. You don't mess with Sentinel and walk away. Naomi exchanged a glance with Nia. Nia grinned. Then let's show them just how wrong they are. They moved in unison, shadows in the dark. And then the killing began. The first man never saw it coming. Naomi struck fast, wrapping an arm around his neck and driving her knife deep into his side. He gasped, eyes wide with shock, but she twisted the blade mercilessly, cutting off any chance of a scream. She lowered his body silently to the cold warehouse floor. Nia was already moving, slipping behind another operative just as he turned toward the sound of a faint thud. Before he could react, she hooked her arm around his throat and wrenched it violently. A sickening snap filled the air, and he went limp in her grasp. 2 down. The warehouse was big, but not big enough to hide the threat Naomi and Nia posed. Their enemies weren't just soldiers. They were assassins, trained to hunt and eliminate problems. But the sisters had been trained for war. Naomi crouched behind a row of crates, counting heads. 5 left, 1 sat at a table, scrolling through a laptop. 2 more stood near a stack of ammo crates, talking quietly. The last 2 were on patrol, moving in opposite directions. Fast and quiet, Nia murmured. Naomi nodded. They moved like shadows. Nia went for the two, talking near the ammo crates, sliding through the darkness like a phantom. She grabbed the first by his collar and drove his head into the metal edge of a crate, shattering his nose and sending him sprawling. Before the second man could react, she was already airborne, wrapping her legs around his neck and twisting him to the ground in a brutal takedown. Naomi handled the patrol with equal precision. She crept up behind the first guard, clamping a hand over his mouth before driving a blade between his ribs. The last patrol turned at the sound of a soft gurgle, but before he could raise his weapon, Naomi put two silenced rounds into his chest. The man at the laptop barely had time to process the deathly silence before Nia shoved a pistol against the back of his skull. "Make a sound, and you won't have a head left to scream with," she warned. He raised his hands immediately. Naomi stepped into view, her cold stare locking onto his terrified face. "Start talking." The man swallowed hard. I don't know anything." Naomi pressed the barrel of her pistol against his temple. "Try again." He licked his lips, sweat dripping down his face. You don't understand. Sentinel isn't just some mercenary group. They have deep ties. Government ties. You think taking down Lattimore hurt them? That was nothing. The people we work for, they don't just make problems disappear. They erase them. They erase entire histories." Nia tightened her grip on the gun. "Who's pulling the strings?" The man hesitated. Then, in a quiet, broken voice, he said, "Director Alan Vaughn." Naomi's stomach turned. That name wasn't just some mid-level bureaucrat. Alan Vaughn was ex-CIA, now head of Sentinel's global operations, a ghost in the intelligence world. If he was involved, that meant this went way beyond Lattimore. We were never the targets. Were we? Naomi realized. We were the bait. The man nodded shakily. Vaughn doesn't care about Lattimore. You embarrassed someone on his payroll, and he saw it as a test. He wanted to see if you were worth eliminating, or if you could be useful. Nia's eyes narrowed. Useful for what? The man barely had time to answer. A single gunshot rang out, his forehead exploded in a spray of red as his body slumped forward onto the keyboard. Naomi and Nia dropped to the ground instantly, weapons drawn. The shot hadn't come from inside. It had come from above. A sniper. Naomi's mind worked fast. They had been compromised. Vaughn's people had been watching the whole time. Nia cursed. "We need to move. No more stealth. No more shadows." This had just turned into a full-blown escape. Naomi grabbed the dead man's laptop and ripped out the hard drive. If Vaughn wanted them to play this game, fine. But they weren't going to play by his rules, asterisk, asterisk. The sisters bolted for the nearest exit just as bullets began raining down from above. Bullets tore through crates and shattered glass as Naomi and Nia sprinted through the warehouse, their bodies moving on instinct. Years of combat training had drilled one thing into them. Asterisk, asterisk, never stay in one place when you're being hunted, asterisk, asterisk. The sniper was precise, his shots landing inches from their heads. Whoever Vaughn had sent wasn't just another mercenary. He was a professional, meant to clean up loose ends. Naomi hit the ground behind a stack of steel beams, her breath controlled, her pulse steady despite the chaos. "They were watching the whole time," she muttered. Nia crouched beside her, reloading her stolen weapon. "Yeah, well, now we know why Sentinel's so damn confident. Vaughn's got eyes everywhere." Naomi glanced at the dead man's laptop, the blood-smeared keyboard still flickering with half-loaded data. "We need this intel decrypted. It's the only way we get ahead of them." Nia peeked around the corner, barely dodging another bullet as it sent sparks flying against the metal. "First, we need to get out of here alive." Naomi scanned the layout. There were at least 2 shooters on the roof, possibly more closing in from the ground. Staying put wasn't an option. They needed to flip the battlefield. Nia's gaze darted to a nearby fuel drum. "Thinking what I'm thinking." Naomi smirked. Boom! Nia pulled a flashbang from one of the dead men's vests, yanking the pin before tossing it toward the center of the warehouse. The explosion of white-hot light and sound disoriented the gunman for just a second, but a second was all they needed. Naomi raised her stolen rifle and fired 2 perfect shots into the fuel drum. The explosion ripped through the warehouse, sending flames and debris into the air. The force knocked back the shooters on the roof, giving the sisters the opening they needed. Move! Naomi shouted. They sprinted for the exit, smoke and fire covering their escape. Sentinel operatives were scrambling, shouting orders, but Naomi and Nia were already gone. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. They hit the streets fast, disappearing into the alleys before the reinforcements could arrive. Their bodies ached from exertion, their clothes singed from the explosion, but they had made it out alive. For now, Nia exhaled sharply, glancing up at the city skyline. Well, that escalated fast. Naomi nodded, gripping the hard drive tightly. We're not just dealing with corrupt cops and judges anymore. Vaughn's running something big, bigger than Sentinel. Nia wiped sweat from her brow. So what's the play? We lay low. Naomi's expression hardened. No, we go after Vaughn. Nia blinked. You want to go straight for the boss? Naomi nodded. We find out what's on this hard drive. Then we use it to burn Vaughn's whole damn operation to the ground. A long pause. Then slowly Nia grinned. I love it when we go big. Naomi smirked. Then let's find ourselves a hacker. Because if Vaughn thought they were dangerous before, he had no idea what was coming. The city was still awake, but Naomi and Nia had learned to move through it like ghosts. They blended into the crowd, weaving through the busy streets, keeping their heads low. The hard drive in Naomi's jacket felt heavier than it should. Inside it was the key to everything. Proof of Sentinel's corruption, of Vaughn's reach, of just how deep this rabbit hole went. But first they needed someone who could break it open. Nia tapped her fingers against her thigh as they walked. I got a guy. Naomi raised an eyebrow. You always got a guy. Nia smirked. That's why you keep me around. Naomi rolled her eyes, but nodded. Where? Nia pulled out a burner phone and typed fast. He works out of an old internet cafe in Brooklyn. Goes by Cypher. Real name's Andre Cooper. He used to do freelance coding for government contractors before he got blacklisted for hacking into a senator's private emails. He's good? Naomi nodded. Good enough to keep his mouth shut. Nia shrugged. If the price is right. They moved quickly, catching a subway headed toward Brooklyn, their bodies tense, eyes scanning every passenger. Sentinel was out there. Vaughn was watching. They knew the hit squads wouldn't stop. But Naomi and Nia weren't the type to sit back and wait for an attack. They were going to take the fight straight to Sentinel's doorstep. The cafe was run down, the kind of place that looked like it should have been shut down years ago. The sign flickered, the windows were covered in grime, and only a handful of customers sat inside, their faces illuminated by the glow of outdated computer screens. Nia led the way, pushing through the door, the bell overhead jingling softly. A thick smell of burnt coffee and cheap ramen filled the air. Near the back, a man hunched over a monitor, typing fast. He wore a hoodie with the word YNCRYPT printed across the back, his long fingers flying over the keyboard. Yo, Cypher, Nia called out. The man flinched, then turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he spotted them. You're supposed to text first, he muttered. Showing up in person is a no-go. Nia smirked. And yet here we are. Cypher sighed, rubbing his temples. You don't come to me unless you're in some deep shit. His eyes darted around the cafe. And I don't like deep shit. Naomi pulled out the hard drive and slid it across the table. We need this cracked. No questions asked. Cypher stared at it, then back at them. He hesitated. This isn't some basic bank account hack, is it? Nia leaned in, lowering her voice. You ever hear of Sentinel? Cypher paled. His fingers twitched. Nope. And if I did, I'd pretend I didn't. Naomi's voice was cold. Too late for that. Cypher swallowed hard. Damn it. You two always bring the worst kind of problems. Naomi folded her arms. Can you do it? Cypher chewed his lip, thinking. It depends. If this thing is encrypted at a government level, it'll take time. And if Sentinel has trackers on it, we could be looking at... The power inside the cafe cut out. Every screen went dark. The hum of computers and fluorescent lights vanished. A beat of silence. Cypher shot to his feet. No. No. They found us. Naomi grabbed the hard drive and shoved it back into her jacket. The front door exploded inward. Sentinel was here. Gunmen stormed in, their movements fast and tactical. Naomi and Nia didn't hesitate. Nia flipped the table. Bullets shredded through the wood, barely missing them as the sisters hit the ground. Cypher scrambled, cursing as he crawled toward the back exit. Naomi popped up, firing 2 precise shots. One gunman dropped, his vest useless against the close-range headshot. Nia grabbed a chair and smashed it across another skull, sending him crashing into a row of computers. Cypher yanked open the back door. "Move!" The sisters sprinted after him, ducking into the narrow alleyway behind the cafe. Sentinel operatives weren't far behind, their boots pounding against the pavement. Naomi shoved Cypher forward. "Go left! Now!" Cypher obeyed, darting toward a side street. Naomi and Nia went the opposite way, drawing fire as they vaulted over a dumpster and took cover behind an abandoned car. Bullets rained down. Nia peeked out, then grinned. "They're hurting us?" Naomi exhaled sharply. "Yeah, which means they want us alive." Nia cracked her knuckles. "Big mistake." The sisters moved as one, pushing forward instead of running. Naomi took out another shooter, her bullet hitting him square in the thigh before Nia closed the distance, breaking his jaw with a brutal elbow strike. Only 2 left. One reached for his radio. "Command, we have them cornered." Naomi shot out his kneecap. He screamed, collapsing to the ground. The last operative hesitated, his gun trembling slightly. Nia stepped forward, eyes dark and full of warning. "Tell Vaughn we're coming for him." The man hesitated. Then he ran. Naomi and Nia watched him disappear. The silence was deafening. Then Cypher came stumbling back into the alley, panting. "We need to get the hell out of here." Naomi looked at the hard drive in her jacket. They still had it. And now Sentinel knew they weren't going to stop. Naomi turned to Nia. "We're taking this straight to Vaughn." Nia smirked. Time to put the fear of God in him. And with that, they disappeared into the night, ready for war. Alan Vaughn wasn't an easy man to find. The former CIA operative had spent years building a reputation as a ghost, a man who operated in the shadows, pulling strings from behind untouchable walls of power. People didn't find Vaughn. Vaughn found them ***. But Naomi and Nia weren't people, they were soldiers, hunters. And they had spent their entire careers finding men who thought they were untouchable. This time was no different. Hashtag. The plan was simple. Draw Vaughn out. Make him come to them, ***. They had the hard drive. They had the proof of Sentinel's network. Bribed judges, assassinations, blackmail operations that reached deep into the government. Vaughn had spent years keeping these secrets buried. Now, Naomi and Nia were holding a shovel. Cypher, still shaken from the attack at the cafe, sat in a dimly lit motel room, typing rapidly on his laptop. Naomi and Nia stood behind him, watching as he prepared their next move. "All right," Cypher muttered. "I've cracked about 70% of the files. Whoever encrypted this was good, but I'm better." He pointed to the screen. Bank transfers, call logs, encrypted messages. Lattimore was just a cog in the machine. Vaughn runs the whole damn show. Nia folded her arms. "So, how do we use this to lure him out?" Cypher smirked. "We hit him where it hurts. His ego. Hashtag. The bait was a news leak. Within hours, an anonymous tip flooded the internet. ***, Judge Warren Lattimore linked to corruption ring involving government officials, ***. Naomi and Nia knew Vaughn wouldn't care about Lattimore's downfall. But the report hinted at something bigger, a hidden source with knowledge of who was really behind the operation. They were challenging Vaughn, and he took the bait. Hashtag. The meeting was set for midnight. A private airstrip on the outskirts of the city, where men like Vaughn handled problems quietly. Naomi and Nia arrived early, hidden in the shadows of an abandoned hangar. Vaughn's men were already there. ***, Sentinel operatives, ***, heavily armed, scanning the area with military precision. Then he arrived. Alan Vaughn stepped out of a black SUV, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He was older than they expected. Late 50s, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. A man who had seen war, who had built empires on blood and silence, ***. Naomi whispered. "We hit him fast, no hesitation." Nia's fingers twitched near her trigger. "Make it count." They moved as one. Hashtag. The first Sentinel guard dropped before he could react, Naomi's silenced pistol putting a round through his skull. The second barely had time to turn before Nia tackled him, twisting his arm until the bone snapped like dry wood. Chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the night. Naomi and Nia didn't stop moving, cutting through Vaughn's men like ghosts in the dark. Within 30 seconds, only Vaughn remained. The once untouchable man now stood alone, his hands raised, his breath heavy. Naomi stepped forward, aiming her pistol at his chest. "You sent killers after us." Vaughn didn't flinch. "And yet, here you are, alive." "Impressive." Nia smirked. "Oh, you haven't seen impressive yet." She tossed the hard drive at his feet. "Everything's on there. Every dirty deal. Every name. Every operation." Naomi's voice was cold. "This doesn't end with us killing you. It ends with your entire empire crumbling." Vaughn looked at the drive, then back at them. He laughed. "Do you really think exposing me will change anything?" His voice was smooth, almost amused. "Men like me don't fall. If I disappear, another takes my place. That's how this world works." Naomi didn't blink. "Then we'll keep hunting them, too." Vaughn studied them for a long moment. Then, slowly, his smirk faded. For the first time, he looked afraid. Naomi exhaled. "Time's up, Vaughn." And she pulled the trigger. Hashtag. By morning, the world knew everything. The encrypted files were leaked. Vaughn's empire collapsed overnight. Sentinel's dirty secrets flooded the news, forcing government agencies to disavow them. Judges, politicians, and high-ranking officials were arrested. And Naomi and Nia, they were gone. No names, no trails, just a legend whispered in the dark. The sisters had done what no one else could. They had burned the system from the inside out. And if anyone like Vaughn